We live? Hey, we're live. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Grayzone. We're back. It's another Friday Live with my award-winning colleague, Aaron Mate. Welcome, Aaron. How you doing?
I'm good, Max. Good to be here, and thanks everyone for joining us and for accepting us and with all of our flaws, including our tardiness. Sorry we're a little bit late, but we'll make it worth your while. We promise.
Well, what we need to do is get one of those countdown clocks like the other more professional podcasters have. See, we do print, we do reporting, we do all kinds of things. So we don't put all the emphasis on live streaming, but I think that's one area where we're going to up our game soon so that you all aren't just left there looking at a blank screen. And, one thing we also don't do that I think we deserve a lot of credit for is we don't have breaks. Like we
That's
don't
right.
say, let's go to a card or whatever. We just go straight through. We plow through like a buzzsaw, just topic after topic. But we will institute that as soon as we get those created. But anyway, thanks for being here with us. And last Friday, we weren't able to do a live stream because Aaron was testifying live before the UN Security Council. Some pretty momentous testimony. We'll hopefully be able to touch on that. But today, neither of us are testifying before the UN today. We're just going to be bashing the parts of the UN that have been captured by the US. And Aaron, we actually got to see each other in person the other night in DC, where you were honored for your contributions to the world of independent journalism, and specifically on Russiagate, your work here at Pushback, and your takedowns of the OPCW Douma cover-up. And here's you with Cy Hirsch. Cy presented you with your Pierre Spray Award for independent journalism, and a lot of luminaries were there. Ben Cohen. Aaron got a big award. I got a Ben and Jerry's gift certificate from Ben Cohen of Ben and Jerry's.
Nice. I didn't get that.
But it was great to see you recognized and to see so many incredible people in one room. And there were other independent journalism awardees like our friend Sam Husseini, Benjamin Abelow, who wrote an important book that provides really critical context on the Ukraine proxy war and the U.S. role in launching the war and basically creating the context for the war to take place. And there were others.
Yeah, and Max, look, we're not going to turn this into a mutual admiration session, but
It's not mutual. We're just admiring you.
No, I got it. But I just want to say that one thing I said in my remarks, and I'll repeat here, is that my work is made possible by you creating the gray zone and creating the space to do the kind of journalism that really is not done elsewhere. The type of uncompromising journalism, commitment to facts, not catering to narratives in order to get published, and taking up topics that nobody else will touch, including things like the dirty war in Syria, which you did so much to lay the groundwork for me to come along and then pick up the baton and cover this OPCW story. So I'm very grateful to you. And it was a great time. And it's nice. Look, there's so much effort, or I shouldn't say so much. There's an effort put into smearing us. We have a lot of trolls, people who want us to be censored, banished from respectable platforms. And some people have been successfully swayed, I think, by that campaign. But some people are not. And so it was nice to be in a room full of people who recognize the work we do and who are willing to admit publicly that they like it, because not everyone is willing to do that, just given how much vitriol and smears we get thrown our way. So it was great. And I'm very thankful to everybody who was there and everybody who supports the Gray Zone, who supports the work we do. It's a rare, moment to be acknowledged, and it's a nice thing. And it's just a reminder for us to keep going, doing what we're doing.
Yeah, it is really thanks to all your support that this was possible, because at the Gray Zone, when we really found our wings in early 2019, it was just thanks to our readers that we were able to do all the work we were doing. One of the first projects me and Aaron did was we went down to Venezuela together, right when the coup was being launched by the Trump administration to remove the elected government in Caracas. And I think we did a lot of damage to their operation, and we continue to do damage. We're going to talk about that today. And this is work that I think wouldn't be able to be featured at other supposedly critical independent publications that hire people who are on the board of National Endowment for Democracy organizations. Like the Intercept was supposed to be that. But yeah, we continue to be able to be totally independent and say whatever we want because of your support. So thanks everyone for being here. And, there were a lot of, I would say, luminaries in that room. It was a private event, so I'm not going to name everyone, but people in Washington, including some unexpected people, are getting really, really frustrated with the Biden administration or the people who control Biden pushing this proxy war up to the line of Crimea and taunting or tempting nuclear confrontation. So I think you were a voice for a lot of those people who can't speak more freely. But moving along, I mean, to a related topic, Donald Trump, 24 hours after calling for peace in Ukraine, saying he would not have ever allowed this war to take place. I don't know if that's true or not. And declaring that he will stop World War III has been indicted. I'm not saying the indictment has anything directly to do with that, although it obviously, to me, feels like an outgrowth of the Russiagate campaign to nail Trump. And we haven't seen the indictment yet, but it relates to hush money Donald Trump paid a porn star, Stormy Daniels, to not talk about their affair. And I think it's really sad that American presidents have gone from sleeping with porn stars, when in the past we could expect American presidents to at least have the dignity to sleep with their interns, or at least just have oral sex with them. I don't know if that constitutes sex or what the definition of is, but this is where we are as a society. Aaron, what are your thoughts on the indictment of Donald Trump?
Well, to me, this definitely feels like the never-ending fallout from Russiagate, because again, liberals went all in on the dumbest conspiracy theory of all time, that the president was a Russian asset being blackmailed by Vladimir Putin. And that, of course, spectacularly failed because it was concocted. And so since then, there have been constant efforts to compensate. There was the first Trump impeachment over Ukraine. Then there was the Russian bounties in Afghanistan, fake scandal. Then there was January 6th, where Trump actually did something. Trump actually did something January 6th, but they couldn't really get him for inciting a riot because that's a hard thing to prove. And he also, I think in his comments on January 6th, he said that we should be peaceful or something. So that was difficult. I do think they have him, by the way, on something in Georgia, from what I understand of what he did there, and trying to pressure Georgia to come up with something that could validate his claims about the election. I think actually there's a case there, but for whatever reason, they couldn't just wait on that one, and they had to trot out or roll out again this years-old case about paying hush money to Stormy Daniels, and somehow coming up with a theory that had to be done to help his campaign, when really I think Trump will argue that this is very standard for people to pay hush money payments to shut people up. John Edwards did that when he was caught having an affair. He was acquitted. So I just see this as a never-ending attempt to compensate for Russiagate. And I think ultimately, I mean, if you're looking at the political impact of this, I think this helps Trump. How can it not? It keeps him in the news, and to his supporters, he can once again claim he's the victim of the deep state. So why people are expecting any different outcome than every other failed Trump so-called scandal before is beyond me.
Yeah, for those who might not have the appropriate context, John Edwards was the populist Democratic North Carolina senator and Democratic presidential frontrunner and Prel hair model who had an affair with a grifter while his wife, who was considered his greatest presidential asset, Elizabeth Edwards, was dying of breast cancer. And emails were released where he had planned a rooftop wedding with his mistress, in which the Dave Matthews Band would perform at the wedding while his wife was on her deathbed. And, as horrible as that is, the worst part of it was proposing Dave Matthews to play anywhere. That really discredits him in my eyes. And so Trump and Stormy Daniels are, Stormy Daniels has been brought out at the center of this by the Manhattan DA. She's been kind of lurking in the background all along. Stormy Daniels is like, when are they going to pull the Stormy Daniels card? Well, the Mueller investigation didn't find anything. We don't know if January 6th is going to lead anywhere to Trump. But the Manhattan DA has pulled this card, Alvin Bragg. He is a Democratic prosecutor. The Republicans are alleging that he was paid with $1 million through a Soros-funded NGO called Color of Change, and that they're calling him one of these Soros prosecutors that are soft on crime. And I think that's a really smart play by the Republicans, just from a completely Machiavellian, cynical political perspective, because it paints them into a corner. And this will be used to, as Aaron said, ramp up Trump's base ahead of the election. I think this prosecutor was previously unknown. So now he's a hero of the Democratic Party base and of Blue Anon. And that's, for a local prosecutor. I mean, I know New York is a big media market, but he would have otherwise been unknown. It's a power move. You would be incentivized to indict Donald Trump. However picayune the violation might have been compared to the massive violations our presidents always commit, whether of international law or domestic U.S. law. And there is something to that claim. So this is shaping up to be another kind of culture war partisan battle that isn't actually about the rule of law. And I think what we're seeing, if Donald Trump is arrested, is we're seeing the mask lifting on the US political system. And we hear constantly condemnations from the State Department of other countries arresting opposition leaders on trumped up charges, Navalny being one of them. The other countries can now point the finger at the U.S. and say the U.S. has jailed its top opposition leader on some ticky-tack charge for being like a sleazebag.
Yeah.
The difference between him and Navalny, one principal difference is he's actually popular in his own country. Navalny, what does he poll at 2%? So I think this will discredit in the eyes of the world the shining city on the hill image of American democracy.
Look, again, what are the details of this case? I mean, it's so boring that I haven't paid attention to it. But what I know is Michael Cohen paid Stormy Daniels. He was reimbursed. He admitted in a letter or something that he was paying this out of his own funds and he was reimbursed. Now he's changing his tune. But of course, Michael Cohen is an indicted felon and who's at his own financial issues and was convicted for it. And so it's just, he is a key figure in this case. And I just don't, it's just, to me, it all like going back to, Russia and Ukraine, none of this would have happened if members of the elite didn't see Trump as such a threat to their rule. Not because he supports policies that threaten their rule, but because they just see him as an unsuitable steward of the global empire. He's too honest sometimes. He's too colorful. He's too reckless. He's too out of control. And so from the start, especially when he began calling for being nice with Russia, getting along with Russia, there was an effort to sabotage him. And this is just, to me, the continued result of that. Even though he's done so many of his policies actually served the interests of the elite, his tax heist, his policies about Russia, which I think helped bring us to the point we're in now. But because sometimes he spoke the truth, like he said, we're in Syria to keep the oil, rather than saying we're in Syria to spread democracy and fight ISIS. They don't like that. And so hence, as a result, because he's still a political force, they have to undermine him where they can. And lawfare is one way to do that.
Well, here's Trump 24 hours before being indicted.
But if this thing isn't solved by the time we have the election, which is possible, it won't be. And there's also possible we'll be in World War III with these idiots that are doing what they're doing. You could end up in a nuclear world war, which will make World War I and World War II look like patty cakes, okay? This unbelievable, because we have people that don't know what they're doing. But if it's not solved, I will have it solved in 24 hours with Zelensky and with Putin. And there's a very easy negotiation to take place, but I don't want to tell you what it is because then I can't use that negotiation. It'll never work. But there's a very easy negotiation to take place. I will have it solved within one day, a peace between them. Now, that's a year and a half. That's a long time.
I mean, there is an easy negotiation. China just put it forward, but the Biden administration rejects it. It involves giving up a little bit of territory that's never coming back into Ukrainian hands.
Imagine something not happening.
The chairman
The key with that is the war has to stop now because Ukraine is being obliterated. You know, whether
there'll be nothing left.
Well, I looked at pictures of cities that are literally
Decimated.
like it's like complete demolition. I was in the construction business. You would demolish a building and it looked like hundreds of these demolition sites. There wasn't a building standing. And these are cities for Ukraine. They were big cities, very big cities. Now, he hasn't really, in Kiev, he hasn't really set the missiles in, but at some point he'll do that one too. There's nothing standing. The other thing is many more people are dead and horribly injured than they're reporting. You know, when you see missiles hitting 15 buildings and 15 buildings falling to the ground, and they're big buildings, there are a lot of people in those buildings, and then they say one person was injured. These are phony reports. Many, many people are being killed that you don't know, but you'll see that later on.
So you'd prefer, if you were president, you think you would have a negotiated settlement and
Within 24 hours.
So that's pretty uncomfortable to have someone of Trump's stature out there talking like that. And it's interesting to note that he's speaking with Sean Hannity. It shows what a hack Hannity is, because Hannity, he sits there night after night, pumping up the war, calling for escalation, calling for assassinating Putin. And then as soon as he sits down with Trump, he's like, oh, so you'd negotiate. Oh, good. Oh boy. Well, you're the master, because I just follow the leader of the Republican Party, whoever it is.
Yeah.
And that's the power that Trump has. So it's so obvious that this is an outgrowth of Russiagate, and that if Trump were playing ball, this wouldn't have happened. It's obvious Alvin Bragg is going for national fame. It's obviously a partisan move, and it's obvious that Trump opened himself up to this sort of thing by being sleazy. We haven't even seen the indictment yet, but I wanted to introduce something that's kind of a novelty now at this point from my former career as a writer for the Daily Beast. Can you believe it? The neocon Daily Beast that constantly attacks us. I worked for them for like a year until I started trying to do reporting from Palestine. And I just happened to be in Arizona, and I heard that Stormy Daniels was performing by the airport at a strip club. She was kind of unknown at the time, but she was she was running against David Vitter, the senator, the Republican right-wing senator, and she was running to kind of embarrass him for his dalliances with sex workers. And so I thought I'd just go down the street. I reached out to her PR team, and they said, we'd love to talk to you. Just come down to this hotel in the lobby and Stormy will meet you. So I got to watch a 25-second ad here. So while we're watching that, I will just describe the situation. Okay, we can skip the ad. Here we go.
Plaza Hotel. It's Arizona.
That's me in
by the
2007.
airport. And I've learned that
I've gained
Stormy
some weight
Daniels,
since then.
adult industry actress and producer, is staying here. And she's going to discuss with us her potential primary run in the Republican primary in Louisiana against Senator David Vitter.
My name is Stormy Daniels. I'm in the adult film industry. I've been with Wicked Pictures for about 7 years as a contract performer, writer, and director.
And so you're getting involved in the Louisiana Senate race.
Apparently so. I had actually nothing to do with it. I was notified about it through a friend who sent me a link saying, oh my gosh, you're a genius. This is so awesome. And I looked at it and I had nothing to do with this, but it is genius.
Yeah.
I wish I could take credit for it, but actually I can't. It was a group of guys down in Louisiana that put the whole site together. And I have people put sites about me all the time, and I usually shut them down pretty quickly. But this one was
just
really
a whole
well done, and
operation
amusing. So
behind
just
her
went with it.
already
So
in 2000.
would you
I guess
enter
it's
the Republican
2010?
primary against David Vitter?
I haven't decided yet. I've never been involved in politics before, but apparently they are calling me to duty, and if that's what it takes, then that's what I will do.
I mean, it's interesting now in the current moment because she's talking about being called to duty about a political operation being set up, and she's kind of being put up as a prop and a spokesperson, and it's obviously a partisan Democratic operation, and she's soaking in the PR and the possibility for getting her brand out.
And David Vitter made headlines when he confessed to being a client of the DC Madam, to paying for sex with several high-priced sex workers. Do you think his hypocrisy is fair game in the race?
And that's what I was going to say. I personally have no issues with his sexual activities or his sexual preferences or whatever it is that he wants to do. My issue with him, I mean, who am I to judge, right? My issue with him is that he's a hypocrite. And, you know, call me what you will, but you can't call me a hypocrite.
And would you challenge David Vitter to a debate right now?
So yeah, it goes on. And I had a long talk with Stormy after the interview. But what's interesting here is, I mean, when you think about blackmail and how much, you know, Jeffrey Epstein compromised powerful political people. Donald Trump was around Jeffrey Epstein. Bill Clinton was around Jeffrey Epstein. You know, I have questions about Stormy Daniels. She talked to me afterwards about how she is a really committed political activist. She was involved in liberal causes at the time. She was, you know, pretty articulate. She was not a stupid person. Although she was, you know, it was kind of demented talking to her and her producer about like how he, you know, she got him a vasectomy for his birthday and like just the weird culture of porn, kind of disturbing. But here you can see she's already being injected into partisan politics at that time. Then Trump proceeds to go ahead and initiate some kind of relationship with her. I don't know how he got to meet her. And this is where it's led him. And she's raising tons of money online right now. And she's emerged as this kind of hero of the liberal world. So I thought about that in that random interview I conducted back in the day. It also shows how stupid Trump is. I mean, just to open yourself up and expose yourself like that.
Well, enough women have accused him of, you know, harassment and worse, abuse, that it seems as if, you know, this was a case where it's led to this for him. I mean, it's a thing where I just never paid attention to the details because so many politicians get caught up in this kind of stuff, right? So why should I care more about Trump's? But that's interesting. I didn't know she had that background. That's one more twist to the story.
Yeah, it's something. Well, one piece of context I never got was how she hooked up with Trump. How did that happen?
Yeah,
she was telling me in that interview that she liked to go to Motley Crue concerts and like take out her breasts and flash the like Tommy Lee and Nikki Sixx or whoever they are.
Yeah.
No, I mean, it's Mick Mars. I'm getting the names of these hair band players wrong, but that's like what she was into. And somehow she hooks up with Trump, who was, you know, he's for decades been it's not like it's easy to get to Trump.
But Trump has harassed a lot of women. So, you know, it's not implausible that she just was another one who he randomly met. And because a lot of women have accused him of this stuff. And,
yeah, I guess. I mean, you think about his record and she's not alone.
No.
I mean, I would like to hear a statement from Melania. I don't think she'd stand with him like David Vitter's wife stood with him during his press conference. You know, when they always get caught, the senators or the governors with some sex worker and they do the press conference, they always have this look on their face, like, and their wives are always there. But Melania was never with Trump for any of this. So props to Melania. But again, I think there's more to the story. There's more of an operation there. If Stormy Daniels was involved, it's obviously an operation now, and Russiagate looms in the background and the war on diplomacy. Trump is a loose cannon. They don't want him back in office. Go ahead, Aaron.
Well, I just want to say, I think two things are true. One, I mean, we heard Trump say in that Access Hollywood tape, you know, just grab him by the genitals, right? And just bragging about how he harasses women. So to me, this is a case where they have someone willing to bring a case and to speak out, and certainly people who want to undermine Trump for the wrong reasons, including the fact that he's sometimes called for diplomacy, not a proxy war in Russia, certainly will take advantage of this thing. So I think it's a matter of both things being true here.
And my last point, since you brought up those comments on those Access Hollywood tapes where he's talking about grabbing him by the genitals in so many words, that was like the Hillary Clinton campaign's last minute bomb. That was their October surprise that they were dropping on Trump, and it was supposed to tank him. And if you looked at the polls were showing that Hillary was narrowly ahead of Trump after that tape was released. And then the FBI announces that they are investigating Anthony Weiner and possibly Hillary Clinton for helping to cover up Anthony Weiner's own sexual perversion. Anthony Weiner is a sexual deviant who is heavily involved with the Clinton campaign, was the husband of her closest body person, Huma Abedin, who went everywhere with her. And he was sending pictures of himself to underage women who he met online, and was involved with, so like someone even lower than Stormy Daniels in the porn subculture, Sydney Leathers. and so that came out through the FBI. It was supposedly a pro-Trump division of the FBI. And that tanked Hillary in the polls at the last second and overcame the Access Hollywood tapes. Now, if you think about this story dropping now, who is this story bad for? It's bad for Zelensky. Zelensky is going to be wiped out of the news cycle at this point, as he is desperately begging for more munitions and more weapons and more aid. And I think we'll be hearing less and less from him. And if we think about his relationship with Trump, I mean, Trump actually sat down with him and said, why don't you just shut up and go work it out with Putin and stop begging me for stuff? So this is what we're going to be hearing about for, I think, the rest of all through the summer.
Oh my God. It's a great time to be in the ratings department at CNN or MSNBC. This has given them a huge bump, but for everybody else, it's just going to be, I think, really annoying. At least with Russiagate, you had the intrigue of a president being accused of being a traitor. That's kind of interesting. Is the president secretly involved in a conspiracy with Russia? But this is recycling a case that's been litigated, at least in public, years ago, and it's going to dominate everything. And that's what we're in for now.
Yep. And we got a question about who Trump's lawyer is. So let me just quickly play a quick statement by Trump's lawyer, so you can make a judgment on his legal representation and what their argument is here. And Trump, as anyone would have advised him to do, is hired a telegenic young female lawyer.
What was your reaction to the indictment? Were you shocked?
Yes, I was shocked. I think, I'm not sure, maybe not shocked. I was,
her name is Alina
it was another,
Habba.
here we go again. This has been his life since 2016 when he went down the escalator. You have to remember, they did this with the Russia hoax. They tried to take his kids down. They did this with his first impeachment, his second impeachment. And now we have a DA who has decided to bring what to me is the weakest and oldest, it's not even a crime. I'm not even sure what it is. It's barely a misdemeanor. He is somebody who in the state of New York has said that he doesn't believe in putting people in jail, and he believes in changing the federal crimes to misdemeanors. But for Donald Trump has reversed it. He's, his PAC was gassed up by George Soros, a very
you describe
big,
it as barely
a
misdemeanor. Then are you saying that, as far as you understand what he's being accused of, he did actually do it?
No. It's a misdemeanor to do a book and record keeping violation. That is what we're understanding this to be. We still haven't seen the indictment. And the way this went, as everybody knows, is what Michael Cohen testified to, what his lawyers have said, which is that he initiated a payment to somebody who was effectively trying to extort him. And all I can say to you is this: I'm a lawyer and I represent a lot of people. And if people sign NDAs and get paid for it, or as an attorney, I pay people who try and extort someone because they just don't want to deal with it, and then those clients are somehow going to get indicted publicly, let alone a former president, that is a very sad state of affairs and very politically motivated.
So I think his lawyer seems pretty effective there, and she's blending the kind of political appeal to Trump's base with the legal defense. And you go to Trump's website, he's raising money off this right now.
Of course. This case is so weak. They know it. It's just, they don't have anything else. I think from the point of view, if you're a devoted anti-Trump partisan, that's your cause. I think from your point of view, you should have waited to see what happened in Georgia, because I do think, from what I understand, there is something to that one. This one, I think, in the court of public opinion, which ultimately is what matters, I don't think is going to go against Trump. I just don't, because no one cares. No one cared, as you mentioned, Max. Like the Access Hollywood tape didn't sway people to vote against Trump. So how will this? This will only, I think, help him, and it will only just waste so much of everyone's time having to hear about it for the next however long. Because after the indictment, whenever it does come out, it's going to be a long time until trial. So that's a long time for the media to squeeze as much money out of this as they can.
Yeah.
Pre-trial hype.
Yeah. Well, we'll see if we have a jailed opposition leader on our hands or a second-term president.
Yeah.
It's going to be one of the two, probably. It's opening day, or it was. I think yesterday was opening day in the major leagues in baseball. And here in Washington, the Washington Nationals, I think today is the opening day for the Washington Nationals. And the first pitch will be thrown by the Ukrainian ambassador because of to honor Ukraine's grand tradition of loving baseball and excellence in baseball. The first 100 fans to enter Nat Stadium receive a free commemorative Stepan Bandera SS Galicia bobblehead doll to honor this great day. But yeah, that's where we're at in Washington right now. And
are they called the Washington Nationalists? Is that what the team is called?
Washington Ultra Nationalists. That's good. This is the Azov rebrand. The Washington Nationalists. We're gonna have it's too bad we couldn't get Andrei Beletsky to throw out the first pitch. He would throw out a grenade and blow up an ethnic Russian child.
He's the co-founder of Azov, right?
Yeah, he's the guy who said that his mission was to lead the white Christian world in a crusade against the Semitic Untermenschen.
I recently argued with somebody recently called into my call-in show about this, and I mentioned him, and this caller said that, he's no longer with Azov.
Right.
But then someone sent me in the Wall Street Journal a few months ago, it was reported he was said to have cut ties with them, but actually he's still advising them and even training with them or something. So he's still very much involved in Azov to this day.
Oh yeah. I mean, Alex Rubinstein wrote about this for us, how Azov tried to say he's no longer with them. But what they did was they put him in charge of their domestic civilian corps known as the National Corps.
Okay.
And their office is literally in the same office that Azov always occupied in Kiev. It's still funded by the Interior Ministry. And I don't know, maybe they put like one of those office dividers that you see in like Kaiser Permanente call rooms, like some little cubicle divider between him and like the Azov battalion, but he's still literally right there working with them. And what he's doing is actually more pernicious because that's the organization, the National Corps, that would go bonkers if Zelensky negotiated and possibly shoot him in the back. They're intimidating people all over Ukraine who have attempted to organize for peace or a negotiated settlement in the Donbass. Yeah, this is one of the pieces. Yeah. Well, this is one of the pieces. And, if you scroll up a little bit, you'll see that's Zelensky presenting the Hero of Ukraine Award to Dmitry Kutsebaila, I think his name is. His call name is Da Vinci, and he's the top commander for Right Sector. He's considered a war hero for fighting the separatists in the Donbass. He was recently killed. We did a segment about how Finnish Prime Minister Sanna Marin came to honor him along with Zelensky. But another interesting factoid about Da Vinci is that what was that guy's name? James, the guy who was fundraising on Twitter all the time and claiming he was fighting with the Ukrainian military. And he was, it's like James Vaughn. I forgot his name, and he's pals with Malcolm Nance. Forgetting his name right now. Someone in the chat is going to fill me in. In any case, this character, James Vasquez, thank you. James Vasquez. Do you know who I'm talking about, Aaron?
I don't know.
Okay, there's this guy, James Vasquez, who is like a home improvement contractor from Connecticut or Massachusetts or something. He went to Ukraine and started posting all these videos of himself and guys in Ukrainian uniforms blowing up Russian tanks, or they would be standing by blown up tanks in the Kiev Oblast. And then he was raising tons of money back home from like suburban housewives who thought he was this great hero, and saying that he was a U.S. military veteran. The New York Times has finally exposed him and Malcolm Nance for running just a sham operation, not actually doing any real fighting. Vasquez completely lied about his military background. He's deleted his Twitter account, which had hundreds and hundreds of thousands of followers. He's gone dark. He's disappeared. Malcolm Nance, I don't know what he has to say about any of this, but Malcolm Nance is now involved in a legal dispute with other people involved in the International Brigade. Nance is accused people who've criticized him of being Russian assets, and said he was launching a counterintelligence investigation into them. And he's teamed up with another guy who lied about his military service to try to take control of the International Brigade. And of course, Nance went to Ukraine claiming that he was fighting on the front lines. He was on Bill Maher, actually, claiming he was on the front lines. I might as well pull up my little thread I did about him. But he wasn't anywhere near the front lines. He was in what he called a safe house to do media operations. And this was known all along.
Wasn't there some headline about Nance, like Malcolm Nance is done talking?
Yeah,
right.
That was his own statement. You know,
yeah. But of course, all he did was go to Ukraine and talk because he wasn't doing any actual fighting.
We might as well do like a real quick segment since we got on this topic.
Okay.
So, yeah, I mean, the New York Times has finally exposed these characters. Malcolm Nance, a former Navy cryptologist and MSNBC commentator, arrived in Ukraine last year and made a plan to bring order and discipline to the International Legion, which Americans have gone to fight in. Instead, he became enmeshed in the chaos.
Yeah, right.
He's involved in a messy, distracting power struggle that plays out on Twitter, where he taunted one former ally as fat. Malcolm Nance is not exactly a model of physical fitness, by the way, and an associate of a verified con artist. He accused a pro-Ukraine fundraising group of fraud, providing no evidence. I'm sure he's probably right there. Then he wrote a counterintelligence report trying to get them fired. He accused one Legion official of fraudulently trying to buy a house on an Australian reality show with money she didn't have. He called her a potential Russian spy. He also said that about Glenn Greenwald. She denied the accusations and reported her to Ukrainian counterintelligence. He's left Ukraine, but he's fundraising with this guy, Ben Lackey, who said that he was a Marine, but in fact is even lying about the fact that he's an assistant manager at Longhorn Steakhouse. He worked as a server, not an assistant manager, according to Longhorn Steakhouse, and the Pentagon said he had no military experience. So this is Nance's boy. Now here's Nance on Bill Maher.
So you're on the front lines?
Yeah.
And you're shooting
Lie.
at the bad guys?
Yeah. And there's a lot more than just shooting at the bad guys. First off, you're right. I was age 60 when I passed the commando course that I went through. And
Just straight up lying on national TV.
What's even funnier is that I knew that to get past artillery, I had to beat that 36-year-old former Marine that was with me. But you know, when you go there, there are a lot of.
I think he might be referring to Ben Lackey right there, calling him a former Marine when he's a server at Longhorn Steakhouse who's lying about being an assistant manager.
Of different components to your job. My first job was doing intelligence work. Then my second job was an infantry intelligence officer on the front line. And then my third job was a special operations operator.
Woo! All right, so the lies go on, but Malcolm Nance actually acknowledged that. I mean, here's what he actually said at the time when he was in Ukraine, and he gave an interview. I think this was to the New Yorker. I'm not sure what it was. Right now, part of my duty is to the press. They were well aware I was a high-level asset. So instead of putting me out on the front line, I'm in a safe house talking to people like you. So he acknowledges that he was never on the front line. He's in a safe house. And I was like, look, I would go looking for Malcolm Nance's activity on Twitter, thinking like James Vasquez, he'd be posting videos from the field about what a badass he was. And he didn't even do that. He was like tweeting about Trump the whole time and acknowledging that, you know, this was all fake. And
he's had a great racket going for a long time. During Russiagate, he presented himself as a national security expert. He wrote a book, I think, that even came out before the election or close to it, saying how Russia hacked the election. So he was really ahead of his time in the Russia
Yeah,
Gate
it
grift.
was like before it even happened. He's like,
he did a great job.
yeah, I looked up his service records in the Navy because he said he was this high-level Navy intelligence officer who oversaw operation rooms of 300 men. He actually said that on another Bill Maher episode.
Yeah.
And Malcolm Nance is listed as a basic Arabic analyst who was doing basic level cryptology for the Navy in the Persian Gulf. And he worked for a time as a contractor in the UAE and was positioning himself as kind of a low-level war on terror expert. And then all of a sudden, and he wrote some book about jihadists, and then all of a sudden Russiagate happened. So he's a Russia expert. He's never been to Russia as far as I know, speaks no Russian, fake. But the New York Times has now finally lifted the mask a little bit on these characters. And I think it's a signal of where the proxy war is going. So we featured a thumbnail in this YouTube video for our live stream of Trump and Putin. They were basically kind of indicted simultaneously. The International Criminal Court issued an arrest warrant for Vladimir Putin at almost the same time as Donald Trump's indictment was coming down the pike. So if you watched MSNBC last week, you would see simultaneous discussions about Putin and Trump being arrested, like justice is finally coming, and Merrick Garland's in the middle of the whole thing somehow. It's almost as though Russiagate was actually true if you look at the way MSNBC was covering this in the Blue Anon mind because of these arrest warrants and indictments. It's framed that way. The timing of Putin's arrest warrant seems to coincide almost deliberately with that of Trump. Now, I've been looking closely into the arrest warrant for Putin by the ICC for the past 2 weeks. We just published an investigation, the first part of our investigation into it. I published it alongside Grayzone contributor Jeremy Lafredo, and I think, honestly, it's damning. I think this blows the arrest warrant out of the water. And it wasn't as though we were necessarily just running around trying to save Putin's reputation. It was just such an insult to our intelligence that this ICC would base its warrant off of a State Department funded report by an organization at Yale called the Humanitarian Research Lab, which actually, if you read the paper, contradicts the warrant itself. And Jeremy managed to get the author of that report on the phone, and he further contradicted the warrant with what he said. But even more damning is that this warrant relates not to Bucha or Kharkiv or any of the centers of violence we've been told about in Ukraine. It doesn't relate to any battlefield atrocities. It relates to allegations that Vladimir Putin and his director of children's welfare, her name is Maria Lova-Belova, have deported 6,000 Ukrainian children to a network of re-education camps inside the Russian Federation. And you have the author of the Yale report going on Anderson Cooper and actually claiming that this is evidence of genocide, connecting this to Nazi Germany. I want to play some of that interview real quick from Anderson Cooper 360. Hopefully it won't be unfortunately it's going to be preempted by 2 ads. But I think it's important to watch this so that we can better understand what I'm going to play for you next. And Jeremy will join us for 10 or 15 minutes to talk about his report, which I'll discuss next. It's an exclusive video report from inside one of these camps that the ICC is alleging are re-education centers and evidence of war crimes. I'm sorry, I didn't share this yet. This is Nathaniel Raymond, the director of the Yale Humanitarian Research Lab, which conducted a State Department-funded report that inspired the ICC warrant against Vladimir Putin.
Ukrainian children to Russia and sometimes even give them military training or forcibly adopt them. Actions, according to the report's authors, that constitute war crimes under international law, possibly even evidence of genocide. The report was produced by the Yale Humanitarian Research Lab as part of a State Department-supported program for gathering evidence of Russian war crimes. It identifies 43 facilities that are part of a network stretching from the Black Sea to Siberia. Their primary purpose appears to be political re-education. Nathaniel Raymond is the Humanitarian Research Lab Executive Director and oversaw the report. Nathaniel, I saw you call this an Amber Alert for Ukraine's children. Can you just explain what you mean?
Well, Anderson, what I mean is that while we know now that at least 6,000 children have been through the system, we think the number is actually far larger. And we are basically dealing with the largest network of children's camps seen in the 21st century that stretches from the Black Sea all the way to the Eastern Pacific coast.
It's all satellite imagery. There's no field reporting that's taken place at all. This team did not even attempt to conduct any visits to any of these camps. And you can see with the kind of language he's using, he is invoking the Holocaust and a network of concentration camps. Also recalls the alleged Uyghur camps in China.
About 1,300 miles from Alaska. And so in these 43 facilities, we have 4-month-olds all the way to 17-year-olds, many of which have not been able to contact their parents in months.
I mean, how is this organized? Who is in charge of this? How high up does this go in Russia?
This goes all the way to the Kremlin. The leader of the program is a woman known as Maria Lvova-Belova, who is under U.S. sanction. She is the Child's Rights Commissioner for Russia. And what we identify in this report is 12 individuals, some of which reporting directly to Lvova-Belova, that are not under U.S. sanction yet, or international sanction, including 4 regional governors. And this is very important. Russia is running sort of what could be described as a twisted sister cities program, where communities in Russia are sponsoring communities in Ukraine on an individual town-by-town basis to bring those children into Russia for re-education purposes, including military training in 2 instances.
So in some instances, they're actually giving children, teenagers, military training, and they're doing re-education in the sense of sort of Russian-focused re-education. They're trying to make them into Russians. Is that right?
Yes, which does constitute a potential crime against humanity and violation of the 1998 Rome Statute and the Genocide Convention. It is illegal under international law, even temporarily, to transfer one group of children to another group for purposes of erasing national identity or ethnicity. That was actually the first trial held at the Nuremberg tribunals against the Nazis after World War II.
So more Nazi invocation.
The Russians, at least some in the government, they seem proud of this. I mean, it's not as if they are doing all of this in secret. They are embracing this as a national project, it seems.
100%. The primary audience here for what is dubbed a humanitarian project can be described as a performance for Russia's domestic citizenry. At the end of the day, this is part of an effort to rebrand the invasion. But what's clear is that it's a violation of the Geneva Conventions, and we're basically talking about thousands of children that are in a hostage situation.
So there it is. He's saying thousands of children are in a hostage situation. They're basically being Russified. Their national identity is being erased, and they're being forcibly deported. And he's putting out an Amber Alert for Ukraine's children. Now, imagine you know very little because you watch CNN. Imagine, or you watch MSNBC, and you don't know that 35-40% of Ukraine's population is ethnic Russian. You don't know that the regions of Donetsk, the republics of Donetsk and Lugansk, have fought a war for the last 8 or 9 years for their independence from the nationalist government in Kiev. You don't know that the war is almost exclusively taken place in ethnic Russian regions of Ukraine. And therefore, you don't know that these children are exclusively, if not almost entirely, ethnic Russian, and therefore sympathetic to the Russian government if not from families that have actually participated in the conflict. So that's kind of some vital context they're leaving out. And by leaving out that context, Raymond is trying to plant the idea in the mind of CNN viewers of Anderson Cooper, former CIA intern, that Russia is stealing Ukrainian children. That's what this is about. And his report actually glosses over that in an extremely cynical fashion. Jeremy Lafredo, the co-author of my report, is heading back home, and he's going to join us in a second. But I'm going to read some excerpts that we pulled from this report, which inspired the ICC's warrant. And, the report itself contradicts a lot of what its author said right there. So,
Let me ask just one question quickly. When he, when Raymond there cited the concept of sister cities, is he taking
sister cities?
Is he taking a dig at like the prince of like this notion that happened to diffuse the Cold War, where there were sister cities between the U.S. and the Soviet Union? Is he taking a dig at that there?
I don't think so. I think he thought it was a clever line to say twisted sister cities programs. And by the way, he used to work with George Clooney on Sudan, so he's like a PR expert.
Oh, so that's a play on the band Twisted Sister? Is that what that is?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
D. Snyder.
I read too much
to take it anymore.
Yeah.
But what he's doing is he's erasing the link between Donetsk and Lugansk, where the majority of citizens voted to join the Russian Federation, and Russia, and the ethnic Russian population in Russia. So basically what has happened is all of these children have gone to Russia to free programs. Most of them last for like 2 weeks. They're cultural programs, and they're escaping a war zone. They come from very low income families, and they're war refugees. And what Raymond is seeking to do is kind of send them back to a war zone where they could be killed by the Ukrainian government for being collaborators, or just be subjected to war, or go back to homes that don't exist anymore because of the fighting. And then let's look at the Yale report itself, the State Department funded report. It first of all says Yale HRL does not conduct interviews with witnesses or victims. So nobody was even interviewed for this report. Analysts are unable to identify public information about whether a child is returned home, but he just said they're all in a hostage situation. So they don't even know about the status. It can be difficult to ascertain this current status of the child. Yale HRL does not conduct ground level investigations, and therefore did not even request access to the camps. So they admit that the research that informed the ICC's arrest warrant relies on no field research, and that the researchers don't even know the status of the children that they claim to the US public are in a hostage situation. In fact, the paper goes on to acknowledge that many of the children who've attended these camps appear to have returned to their families when scheduled. Many children taken to camps are sent with the consent of their parents for an agreed duration of days or weeks and returned to their parents as originally scheduled. It also says that many of the parents are low income and wanted to take advantage of a free trip for their child. This is a war crime. Some hope to protect their children from ongoing fighting, to send them somewhere with intact sanitation, or to ensure they had nutritious food of the sort unavailable where they live. Other parents simply wanted their child to have a vacation. Again, this is the State Department funded report, which he's saying is a war crime. So where's the evidence of genocide? Well, we can turn to another passage in this report, another disclosure buried deep in the report. There is no documentation of child mistreatment, including sexual or physical violence, among the camps referenced in this report. Now, I checked the footnotes, as I did with Adrian Zentz's research on the Uyghur camps, and found tons of flaws, as I did with Zentz's research. And one of the most glaring flaws was a citation which was used to back up the claim that children are sent on Russian government airplanes and trains. I guess the trains is used to kind of evoke cattle cars or buses to this network of re-education camps. So I followed the citation to an article by RIA Novosti, which is a Russian state media organization. And I read the article that they cited. And like the authors of this report, who have tons of money from the State Department, I used Google Translate. They actually didn't even have an in-house translator. They used Google Translate for everything. So this is about a camp in the Russian town of Magadan. The children are all from Donetsk. And here's the testimony of one child about this horrible re-education center. While we were driving from the airport, we were very impressed with the local landscapes. I like to walk in the fields, pick flowers. It's very interesting to see nature. All kinds of beautiful views. When we were driving, I saw small rivers flowing from the mountains. Very beautiful. The views are gorgeous. Well, that testimony was omitted from this report. And along with the fact that the children are ethnically Russian, largely identify with Russia, and have faced human rights abuses under a Ukrainian government which has banned their religious denomination, the Russian branch of the Orthodox Church, sought to outlaw their language, the Russian language, banned it from universities, and has attacked the ethnic Russian population violently for 9 years. All of this is left out, and the ICC prosecutor has never been confronted with any of these flaws. But, as I said, Jeremy Lafredo did get Nathaniel Raymond on the phone. I don't know. Jeremy's here now. So let's bring Jeremy in, and we're going to play some of his exclusive video report for you and talk to him about his conversation with the author of this very flawed report. Welcome, Jeremy.
Thank you.
So any thoughts or opening statements before we just play a short excerpt of your video report from inside one of these quote unquote re-education camps? Or maybe you want to introduce that report.
Yeah, so I was there. I was in Moscow in November, and I was invited to go check out one of these. They called it a school that had children from Donetsk and Lugansk, and they were practicing music. I was there. I thought everything was, really great. These kids were learning music. They were eating. They were away from the front lines. It seemed like a beautiful program. Fast forward 4 months, I'm seeing camps like these being accused of war crimes and human rights abuses and evidence of abduction and kidnapping. And I'm thinking this is the same thing that I saw. So I went back and I looked at all my interviews and all my footage, and that's what the report is.
Okay, well, let's take a look at this excellent report, another excellent report by Jeremy. This is like a documentary style report from inside the Donbass Express.
Re-education camps, but that assumption would be wrong. I visited one of these camps 4 months ago, unaware that it would be so important to future war propaganda. In November, I was on assignment for Rebel News in Moscow. Mostly, I was doing streeters, seeing what regular Russian people thought about the war. But after meeting someone whose wife was pretty important on the Russian music scene, and after introducing myself, I was invited to an old Soviet-era hotel in Pokrovsky. It turns out it was one of these so-called camps or schools that prompted allegations of kidnapping, abduction, re-education, and eventually an ICC arrest warrant. Funded by the Russian government, this hotel was turned into a makeshift sleepaway camp for children from Donetsk and Lugansk who were interested in the musical arts and whose parents wanted them away from the front lines. They called it the Donbass Express. I was able to look around and speak to children and teachers. The children stayed in the hotel, and the teachers slept in cottages that surrounded the property. Peter Lundstrom is a professional violinist and a teacher at the school.
Но эта школа называется Донбасский экспресс, потому что здесь сейчас, благодаря поддержке государственного фонда президентского, мы смогли привести сюда 80 детей из Донецка и Луганска. Это талантливые музыканты, которых мы привезли на 12 дней сюда, и вот здесь они живут все вместе с нами, получают уроки у замечательных, выдающихся преподавателей, слушают концерты, получают новую информацию. В общем, такая история. Конечно, конфликт повлиял на них. Многие из них потеряли свои дома. Многие, некоторые, по крайней мере, потеряли своих близких. в зоне конфликта, они фактически не могут продолжать профессиональную деятельность. В том же самом Донецке не работают ни филармонии, ни учебные заведения, ничего. Это все исключительно дистанционное обучение получается, что, конечно же, для музыкантов пагубно невозможно. Да, они могут вернуться. Мы надеемся, что очень скоро мы освободим, liberate Донбасс, и тогда они смогут вернуться к обычной жизни.
AG1 is so much more. Well, we'll just interrupt that during the ad. Jeremy, you talked to Peter Lundstrom. He was the instructor of the students there. Talk a bit about your exchanges with him while visiting the camp, but also since this report has come out. I know you've been in touch with Peter. What does he say about it?
Well, I went to the camp. I was invited the same day. No one knew I was coming. He was very welcoming. He gave me a tour. He let me watch them play music. He let me speak to the kids. He even asked kids, because they trust him, they like him. I'm walking around. I don't speak Russian. Clearly, I'm an American. He's asking if they would maybe talk to me on camera. He invited me to have lunch with everyone. They have like a lunch cafeteria type thing where they have 3 meals a day. All the kids are laughing and having fun, and they go back and they play their music. Very welcoming, very nice guy. I spoke to one other teacher there, similarly very nice. He's a professional violinist, so he's normally touring around Russia. And so he actually stopped doing that to help organize this camp because he wants to do what he can for the children in Donetsk and Lugansk. And since publishing the report, I talked to him while I was doing it, just making sure all the translations were correct and making sure that, none of the children in the videos are at risk of, retribution from the Ukrainian government if I post this video. And he was very thankful that that the video came out and that he's in the video and that the kids are in the video and people know that the Donbass Express, they're trying to organize another one very soon. But yeah, no, everyone was.
Well, the children all went home. They weren't held as hostages in this center, or
the children were there for 2 weeks and they went home. And it's funny, even the report will say you might have highlighted this already in our article. Most of the children have the consent of their parents and they return home on their scheduled dates. They'll say that deep within the report, but on CNN or on the news and in his interviews with the mainstream media, he'll say that these children are in fact, abducted.
Right. Let's continue a little bit with the report where Peter discusses some of the threats to the children where they're from the Ukrainian government. And let's consider that Yale HRL, the State Department funded unit, and the ICC apparently want to send these children all back right now to that area.
Было все тише, конечно же, не было такого сумасшедшего конфликта, работали филармонии и так далее. Но то, что эти люди все время жили под возможностью смерти, это факт. То есть постоянно прилетало, постоянно. Вот. Особенно, конечно, в 2014, 2015, 2016 годах, потом немножко подзатихло, но в целом угроза жизни была постоянной.
Я здесь по, скажем так, приглашению, очень такому щедрому. Вообще не думал, что когда-то окажусь в Москве, побываю на концертах многочисленных живой музыки. А живая музыка — это прежде всего духовное обогащение и очищение. И здесь прежде всего, чтобы научиться и развить свои какие-то навыки, которые пока что только в задатке находятся. Я сам из Донецка, Донецкой Народной Республики. Что там происходит? Стреляют, там, впрочем, как и всегда. Вернее, не то, что как и всегда, а, впрочем, вот как и в последнее время пока что все потихоньку продвигается. Вроде как и меньше, конечно, обстрелов стало. Все равно, конечно, стреляют везде, и в Донецкой Народной Республике, и в Луганской Народной Республике. Но, тем не менее, люди все равно просто, как бы не то, что даже устали, а просто хотят уже очень.
He said that he's grateful to be at the Donetsk Express. Here you can see some typical rehearsal, a lesson at this so-called re-education that you visited during Lawfare.
Ну, мы
There's
продолжаем
another
заниматься,
student.
несмотря ни на что.
She's saying here we continue our
Обучаемся и
musical
находим
studies
этому
despite
время,
what's been
естественно,
going on
потому что
around
это
us
то, что отвлекает от обстановки и
because it gives us
окружающей. Ну и,
relief.
конечно,
The Yale report accuses these camps.
So you actually interviewed students as well in the camp. What would you say their mood was about being there, about going back home? And one of the primary complaints or allegations in the Yale HRL report transmitted through the ICC is that these children are basically being brainwashed, Russified. Patriotic educations imposed on them. Did you see any of that?
No, I didn't see any of that. And, if we just look at, maybe picture this happening, something like this in America, you have, economically underprivileged people who live, maybe a few hours outside of New York City, and, they get an all-exclusive, all expenses paid trip into New York City to practice their passion for 2 weeks. Everything's paid for, and back home they were, living under the threat of dying and being bombarded by bombs. And now they're safe in a city, doing what they love with kids who are similar to them. And they didn't want to leave. They don't want to go home back to the war zone. They want to stay. This was essentially a vacation for them. They didn't even think of it as like something that was political. They were like, we are being allowed this trip to get taught music by professional teachers, and it was a privilege for everyone. From what I could tell.
And you got to speak to the author of this Yale HRL report, which has inspired the ICC warrant against Vladimir Putin, about your experience at the Donbass Express. And you essentially conducted an interview with him about his own work. How did that interview or discussion come about? And what did Nathaniel Raymond say when you challenged him or asked him critical questions about his report?
I decided that I was going to email him, and I essentially sent him an email saying, I would love to tell you about the Donbass Express, considering that, you guys didn't go to any of these camps that you were writing about and being funded to write about. I've actually been there, unlike anyone on your team. So I would love to tell you about it. So he said, okay. And we hopped on the phone and I told him about it. And not like he said in the news, but during our phone call, he said that most of the camps that he's written about, which is their report contains 43 camps. He was like, a good number of the 40 are just like the Donbass Express. They're cultural education. They're like, he compared the camp's nature to teddy bears, meaning they're safe and everyone's happy about it. And so he said that on the phone, and he did not say that on CNN or anything like that. I thought that was an interesting admission.
Yeah, I mean, he kept, I've seen a transcript of your conversation with him. We worked on this article together. He kept saying that what you visited was a re-education camp. But at the same time, he said that the vast majority of the 43 camps that his team investigated by satellite and by, telegram, social media, were teddy bears, that they were cultural centers. So it kind of blows out of the water the claims he made on CNN.
Definitely. It definitely blows nothing he said on the CNN. He said during our one-on-one phone call. And another point I'll highlight from the phone call is, in the beginning, I said, why didn't you go to any of these camps? Like, why, if you're going to, do this giant report that's going to influence a international criminal court arrest warrant for the president of Russia, why didn't you just try to go to one? And he said, well, we're considered extensions of U.S. intelligence in Russia, so we would never be allowed to do that. And insinuating that he's not an extension of U.S. intelligence. And then later in the call, he says that they are in contact with U.S. intelligence. They're getting access to certain satellites above Russia from U.S. intelligence.
He said that the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command provided them access to their satellites. That's the Pentagon. So they worked with the Pentagon. And he also stated that the U.S. National Intelligence Council, which basically coordinates between the CIA and private policy, like think tanks and policy groups, applied a lot of pressure to his team at Yale to document the Russian government's operations after the Russian military entered Ukraine.
He said that the U.S. intelligence put pressure on the Yale team to come up with something.
Those are his direct words.
Well, listen, that's damning. When I, a few days ago, was just pointing out on Twitter, just randomly, because I haven't looked into this like you guys have, and this is incredible what you've done. I was pointing out that the only source I could see for all these claims about a mass Russian abduction program of children is State Department funded studies. And then people would say in response, well, just because the State Department is funding it doesn't mean it's serving the State Department's agenda or the State Department's involved. The State Department funds all kinds of things. But you're reporting here that actually the author of the study has admitted that there was direct pressure from the U.S. intelligence.
It's worse than that, Aaron. Jeremy, you asked Nathaniel Raymond straight up about the State Department role in this report. What did he say?
He said that at first they were focusing on human rights abuses in Afghanistan. And because of pressure from the State Department, they actually started to focus on Ukraine. So they got their direct
marching orders
from the State Department, from the U.S. government, to look at exactly what they're looking at now. So it's the opposite of independent.
And those orders came 2 weeks before Russia invaded Ukraine. So as the U.S. intelligence apparatus was starting its whole drumbeat about a Russian invasion, while Ukrainian forces were massed at the contact line and starting to shell the Donbass, he got his marching orders. So the State Department appears to have been guiding this whole project. And Raymond's role is just, he's the satellite analyst, technology expert who is brought in almost like as a hired gun.
I think what he said that we were put on standby. This is the 2 weeks before the invasion. Yeah. So he's almost speaking as if he's, a soldier. My team was put on standby before the invasion.
This is his direct quote. We were told to stand by and form a squad. And then by spring, we knew the good stuff was happening.
Yeah.
Well, listen, I can't wait to read your article. This has just come out at thegrayzone.com. And I want to issue a challenge here to the people who are going to be upset by this article. And this stands for everything we do, where we challenge a very dominant propaganda narrative. We get called all kinds of names. We get called apologists for whatever government that is being targeted by these allegations. But we never get a written rebuttal. I never gotten a written rebuttal to anything I've reported on the OPCW Syria cover-up scandal. I've gotten all kinds of people calling me names and trying to harass people who publish me or who give me awards. And the same thing applies here. I'd like to see a written rebuttal to Jeremy and Max's report from its detractors, not just name calling on Twitter, but see if you can actually refute the reporting that Max and Jeremy have done here. And I'm betting, just like I never saw any written rebuttal to Max's reporting on the reality inside Xinjiang when China was accused of a genocide, and Max went through the actual, just as you guys have done here, Max went through the reports of the people pushing these allegations and showed that the data doesn't support them. I'd like to see these people, or I'm predicting that there will be a similar lack of response here, just like there hasn't been a written response to reporting on Xinjiang or on the OPCW Syria cover-up scandal. I'm predicting there won't be any kind of written rebuttal here because I think, as you guys it seems like your report here is based a lot on what the Yale study itself says. The problem is no one ever actually reads these studies. They just parrot whatever the State Department talking point is about them.
Great point. And, unlike with our work on Xinjiang, which was really just fact-checking Adrian Zentz, who was the one person brought in to cover this issue from afar without gaining any access to the camps, we did gain access here to the subject of this ICC arrest warrant and this Yale HRL State Department funded report. And what Jeremy did was, I think, something that other journalists couldn't do, because he's one of the few Western journalists who have actually gone to one of these places, was approach Nathaniel Raymond, the director of Yale HRL, and say, would you like to include this in your report? Would you like to talk about what I found there? And he basically said no. Right, Jeremy? He was like, I'm not really interested in this, but it's a teddy bear like most of the camps we investigated.
Yeah, he in terms of war crimes, he pointed out, he said, he's calling these camps where we bring, where Russia brings ethnically Russian children to learn music and be safe and eat food. He calls those are war crimes. Those are war crimes. And then he says the Ukrainians, maybe sometimes they shoot POWs in the knees, but it's not really something that we're focused on or something to that effect. And it's just so funny that one thing like bringing children to music school could be framed as a war crime, and shooting POWs in the knees is something that war crime investigators are just not that concerned about.
Yeah, there's an amazing part of your interview with Nathaniel Raymond where he said that his team had actually was looking at Russian strikes on Ukrainian grain silos, and they found that one silo exploded, generated such a massive explosion, like bigger than the Oklahoma City Federal Building, that they suspected strongly that there was a weapons munitions factory being maintained by the Ukrainian military in that silo, and that they had essentially uncovered evidence of Ukraine planting military facilities in civilian infrastructure, which Amnesty International mentioned in its report that it later apologized for. And he said, well, but we can't prove that. We can't really prove that. So we're just going to move on to this other thing that's supposedly much worse, which is Russian children getting free music lessons.
Exactly.
And amazing. I going to extend an invitation to Nathaniel Raymond to defend his report with me and Aaron and Jeremy. And, but he, on the record, made all of these statements, which discounted many of the statements he made on Anderson Cooper. And again, if you read the Yale HRL report, it's not exactly what it's being presented as by the ICC or US media. And why, Aaron, do you think this ICC arrest warrant is significant? I mean, what does it accomplish?
Well, the same reason all of these, really consequential allegations are so important that we debunk, or that at least that we assess, is because they're used to further war. They're used to sabotage diplomacy. They're used to justify sanctions. You can, that's the case with the genocide allegations in Xinjiang. That's the case of these chemical weapons allegations in Syria. Back after the earthquake in Syria recently, a few days afterwards, Ned Price of the State Department was asked whether or not the Biden administration is going to lift some of its sanctions and engage with the Syrian government. And one of the things that Ned Price said is that we can't engage with the government that gasses its own people. So these allegations are so foundational to the propaganda narratives needed to justify imposing actual harm on civilian populations in these targeted countries. And same here with Russia. If you indict a president of a country for war crimes, it makes it that much more difficult to make peace with them and to end this proxy war that has been so catastrophic. So you need these kinds of allegations to justify continued war, because the argument is, we can't make peace with someone so diabolical. It's really actually a fig leaf to cover to continue diabolical policies that hurt people on all sides, especially in Ukraine, who are the foremost victims of this whole crisis.
You couldn't have said it better. If any U.S. president or Western official sits down with Putin or communicates with Putin, now they'll be accused of communicating or attempting diplomacy with an accused war criminal. The Serbian president, Aleksandar Vučić, has said this himself. He said this ICC warrant is designed to prevent diplomacy, which was also the point of Russiagate, to prevent Trump from conducting diplomacy over missile treaties with Putin, for example. And this is part one of a two-part investigative series. I'm going to provide the history of the ICC prosecutor, who's a new prosecutor, and how he is essentially captured by the U.S. And the U.S., which is not a party to the Rome Statute, which has repeatedly assailed and sanctioned the International Criminal Court, has now turned around and decided that they love the ICC. It's absurd what's taking place to witness how captured all of these multinational institutions that are supposed to prevent war and prevent atrocities is at this point. And the OPCW, Aaron, the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, is another one of them that I want to get to. But Jeremy, is there anything else you want to add about this excellent exclusive video report?
I just want to, I would like to highlight, going back to people who would like to write a written response or criticize this report, how many layers of information that we have. We have the ICC report. It's debunking itself with claims that are contradictory to claims made in other parts of the report. And then we have on the ground inside of these camps that they're talking about. And then we have an interview with the author of the report. So it's really hard to say it's propaganda or it's not true. There's so many primary sources, including the report itself and the author.
Yeah, so you're welcome to try. And this is another reason why we are a deprecated source on Wikipedia, because Nathaniel Raymond's Wikipedia page could be updated to include the fact that he works hand in glove with U.S. intelligence, that he works for the State Department, and then he has issued these statements which contradict the statements he makes in publicly in media. So the Grayzone has to be a source that you cannot cite. I mean, we could be used to knock down so many official Wikipedia pages if we were allowed to. But we're not. So, Jeremy, thank you so much for coming through to join our live stream for this another excellent exclusive video report. Also, check out Jeremy's report from East Palestine, Ohio, which I think is the best video piece we've seen on the chemical catastrophe there. And we're looking forward to, I know you're working on another project about a lithium mine in the US, which few other reporters seem interested in. So we're looking forward to that.
Great. Thank you, guys.
All right. Take care, Jeremy. So, Aaron, do you want to do OPCW? Or I got about 20 minutes or so, and I got to do another panel at 5.
Up to you. Up to you. If you have time, I do, but
yeah, can you queue up your I want to talk about your exchange with Phipps.
Okay. All right. I will play the clip. 1 second.
Yeah, someone's asking. Yes, we are blacklisted as a reference source on Wikipedia because we're just that good. And if you check out our Wikipedia page, it's like just one smear after another. They even use the neocon commentary site to call us pro-Hamas. Like, that's our Wikipedia page. It's a joke. So Aaron, just to intro this, Aaron Mate testified last week, 1 week ago at the UN Security Council about the OPCW's cover-up of the Douma investigation in April 28, where the Syrian government was accused of attacking civilians with chlorine. It was, in my view, and just so obvious that it was bogus, and it was used to justify missile strikes by the US and the employer of Thomas Phipps, who we see here from the UK, who's their UN representative, who's always trolling you on Twitter, Aaron. So let's watch this exchange between Thomas Phipps and the Grayzone's Aaron Mate.
Mr. Marty made various claims today in this meeting, one of which he focused on at length, was the issue of foaming at the mouth and whether or not it can be caused by chlorine. He said quite clearly that the IIT does not address this issue in its report. That's simply not true. It's not true. It does so directly on page 43 of the report under section 6.106. And I encourage you to also, look online, look at the very clear attempts and successful attempts that have been made to counter the claims that Mr. Mate continues to make.
So what was your response? And he just walked out. He stormed out of the room after that. Am I right?
Yes. After he spoke, he left the room, which is unfortunate, as I pointed out, because what he was saying was just factually incorrect. And I pointed this out to him in his absence, which unfortunately he wasn't around to hear. So let me go to that.
Now you see how hard it is to DJ this whole thing.
What I did get from the
get some volume if possible.
was a substantive challenge on one issue, which I appreciate him raising. Unfortunately, he has left the room, so he's not here anymore to hear my response, which is unfortunate because I think he could benefit from hearing my answer. Now, he pointed out that the IIT report, and he said it's on page 43, paragraph 6.106. He pointed out that he argued that the IIT does address the issue of whether foaming is consistent with chlorine gas. Profuse rapid foaming, as observed and reported in Douma, is consistent with chlorine gas. And he says that the IIT did address that issue. I point out two things in response. First of all, my argument was that the IIT's toxicologist does not issue a judgment on whether or not the symptoms, including profuse foaming seen in Douma, are consistent with chlorine gas. The IIT's toxicologist does not. Now, there is a reference, which the representative from the UK pointed to, of the IIT making a claim about chlorine gas and foaming, not specific to Douma, not assessing whether those specific symptoms in Douma are consistent, but the IIT does make one reference, which I will read. This was the paragraph he referred me to. It says this: the IIT also notes that as chlorine gas reacts with the cells and moisture in the gastrointestinal tract to produce acids, that reaction also leads to the oral and nasal secretion of a foam-like substance, which may or may not have a pink tint believed to be blood. Let's assume, although they don't state it, let's assume that they are trying to say here that this passage applies to what happened in Douma. Well, turning to the footnote for this claim, which is in the IIT report, it's a study called Chlorine Gas Inhalation, Human Clinical Evidence of Toxicity and Experience in Animal Models. Now, I have that study. I've produced it. And it's unfortunate that the British representative is not here for me to tell him that the source that is adduced by the IIT for that claim about a foam-like substance contains no reference to a foam-like substance whatsoever. There's no mention of the word foam. There's no mention of the word secretion, no mention of frothing. There is nothing in the source provided by the IIT to support its claim that chlorine gas can produce a foam-like substance. And again, the issue here is not just whether chlorine gas can produce foaming, it's whether it can produce it rapidly.
So basically a lie-by shooting.
Yeah, and the most important point I made there was actually the one I made just there at the end, because look, nobody contests that chlorine gas can theoretically cause foaming. The original report put up by the Douma team noted this, said that in some circumstances, chlorine gas can cause foaming. The question is, can it do so rapidly in cases where chlorine is alleged to have caused rapid death, as is the case in Douma? According to the official OPCW narrative, the victims in Douma died within minutes. And when German toxicologists, military toxicologists, looked at this back in June 2018, what they told the OPCW was there's no way this could have been chlorine gas, because chlorine gas, while it could theoretically cause foaming, there's no way it could cause that foaming rapidly and within minutes. That if chlorine gas really killed these people instantly, as is alleged in Douma, there's no way that foaming could have developed. And that's why the initial investigators suspected that this was some kind of nerve agent used in Douma, because that symptom of rapid foaming is a symptom of nerve agent. But the problem is when they looked at all their chemical samples, there was no evidence of a nerve agent whatsoever. And the fact that there's no evidence of a nerve agent, plus the fact that this foaming is so inconsistent with chlorine gas, that is yet more evidence that this incident was actually staged by people who were trying to make it look as if this was a chemical attack, because chlorine gas could not have caused that profuse foaming. And that finding by the Germans was censored by the OPCW, and that's one of many findings that were censored. And that's one of the findings I pointed out at the UN that were censored, which nobody contests. Nobody contests that these findings were censored, and that's why they have to go to these diversions, such as the IT is making an obvious point there that foaming can theoretically cause foaming gas. Nobody disputes that. The question is, can it cause foaming rapidly as in Douma? And every expert to weigh in on this has said no.
Well, it's worse than you describe. I mean, you put it elegantly that this incident was staged. But what was the staging? What did we see? We saw photos of dead women and children in a basement in Douma, Syria in April 2018, which was then displayed across the world, disseminated by the media to trigger airstrikes by the US, UK, and France. So if they weren't killed by chlorine, and you can find chlorine anywhere, if there's just common chlorine like that you put in swimming pools or bleach, if there wasn't chlorine and there wasn't a nerve gas, then how were they killed? And were they killed, I don't know, maybe by Syrian army conventional weapons, or were they killed by the psychotic jihadist bandits that occupied that area of eastern Syria, which I actually visited, and I spoke to residents of Ghouta about what they had endured under the control of these Saudi and Qatari funded militias who literally held them hostage.
Yep.
Are we talking about another kind of human rights violation that the West is covering up? I mean, the cover up has multiple layers, and that's
Yes, it
something
does.
that you raised, Aaron, at the UN.
Well, and I raised that by simply quoting a leaked email from the OPCW when one of the OPCW officials who went to that meeting with the German toxicologist who told them this was not chlorine gas. The symptoms here are not consistent with chlorine gas. One of the officials, who is not one of the dissenting inspectors that we know about, but his name is Mark Bloom. He was the head of the OPCW laboratory. He pointed out in a leaked email that one of the German toxicologists had raised the possibility that this whole thing was staged because their symptoms were so inconsistent with chlorine gas. And I was just simply quoting that leaked email. But yes, you have to ask the obvious question. If it wasn't chlorine gas, because all the evidence undermines the case that this was chlorine gas, and it wasn't a nerve agent because no nerve agents were detected, and it's very easy to detect nerve agents if they're actually used, then what was this? And yes, the most benign explanation possible is that all these victims were killed by a Syrian government conventional bombing, and then their bodies were used as props. But another interpretation could be that actually these people were killed by the sectarian fanatics that controlled Douma at the time, and then who then used their bodies to stage this scene. And we don't know how, but all we know is that the International Chemical Weapons Watchdog that was tasked with investigating these deaths has presented a baseless explanation for what happened and has covered up its own findings. That's the only thing we know. Nobody contests that. No one at the UN from the US or UK or France or all the other states who support the cover-up contested my fundamental assertion that the findings of the OPCW probe into Douma were suppressed. And yet, none of them want any accountability. None of them want to actually hear from the dissenting scientists and have them air all the evidence that was suppressed.
And just one more issue that came up during your testimony that I think is important to highlight is that some of the power dynamics actually shifted during this meeting, with the Brazilian government weighing in on the side of those who are seeking critical accountability, essentially on your side. The Brazilian government that was previously firmly aligned with the US on everything from Ukraine to Venezuela.
Yep. That's right. The Brazilian representative shocked people in the room by coming out in support of accountability for the scandal and criticized the US and UK because they previously blocked the testimony of Jose Bustani, who is a veteran Brazilian diplomat. He was the first director general of the OPCW. He was ousted by the Bush administration because he stood in the way of the Iraq War. And these veteran inspectors that we know about that challenged the cover-up of Douma, they're so experienced that their tenure at the OPCW coincides with Bustani's from 20 years ago, back when he was the OPCW's first director general. So Bustani wanted to come to the UN Security Council and testify in their defense, but the US and UK blocked him. And so at this meeting last week, the Brazilian representative, he criticized the suppression of Bustani's testimony, and he also called for accountability. So let me play one brief clip of that.
Let's do that.
Before I finish, I would like to
more great sound.
4 points. First, and I also directly speak to Mr. Mate. First, it's difficult to believe the countries that you quote that have silenced Ambassador Bustani, denying him an opportunity to speak before the Security Council.
He's condemning them for denying Bustani the ability to
We
speak.
know for a fact that your information is correct. Ambassador Bustani, luckily, was given a chance to talk, not in the Security Council, but through a documentary, Symphony of One Man, who is not easy to find, but is in Vimeo. For those who want, I can give the link to access the documentary and see for themselves that he has at least an interesting story to tell.
I think the volume is so bad. It's
Yeah,
gonna.
what he's referring to here, so he's talking about a documentary about Jose Bustani, about his story, which included being ousted from the OPCW under pressure from the Bush administration. And the documentary also deals with the U.S. then blocking his testimony when he tries to come back to speak in defense of the OPCW whistleblowers, nearly 20 years later. And the representative from Brazil went on to ask me a series of questions, including some suggestions on how the OPCW cover-up can be addressed. And I gave them in my remarks. And we've already published a segment on that at the Grayzone on our YouTube page. And I'm going to publish my full response this weekend on the Grayzone's YouTube page, which you'll see. But basically, that was a sea change in when it comes to this issue, Brazil coming out in support of accountability for this cover-up.
And I believe President Lula da Silva has issued some statements against sending more weapons to Ukraine, which
and at a vote this past week on having an international investigation of the Nord Stream 2 bombing, it was the only countries to vote in favor at the Security Council were Russia, China, and Brazil.
Well, the world is changing. The world is changing rapidly. We haven't even talked about the Xi Putin summit, but you can see a microcosm of that shift at the area meeting of the UN Security Council, which featured testimony from our own Aaron Mate. Aaron, I got to go pretty soon. We could do you want to do a serious segment?
Yeah, let's touch on this briefly. The U.S. military occupation force in Syria has come under new attacks recently, and then that led to the U.S. launching airstrikes on militias. But the initial attacks on the U.S. positions killed one U.S. contractor and wounded 6 U.S. service members. And now we learn that these service members have traumatic brain injuries. And lost in all of this is any acknowledgement of why the U.S. actually is in Syria. The U.S. claims to be there fighting ISIS, but as I've written about before, the Pentagon's own reports debunk this claim. They point out that the U.S. is barely fighting ISIS. The real reasons have been articulated by people like Donald Trump and Dana Stroul, who's now a top official under Biden, that we're there to take Syria's oil, not because we need the oil ourselves, but because controlling the oil and controlling Syria's wheat, which is in the region where the U.S. is occupying, that gives the U.S. leverage over, Syria's political future. That's pretty much it. And so because of that, U.S. troops keep getting hurt because they're being put in harm's way for that goal.
Here's why U.S. troops are in Syria.
The United States still had compelling forms of leverage on the table to shape an outcome that was more conducive and protective of U.S. interests. And we identified 4. So the first one was the 1/3 of Syrian territory that was owned via the U.S. military with its local partner, the Syrian Democratic Forces. Now, this was a light footprint on the U.S. military, only about 1,000 troops over the course of the Syria Study Group's report. And then the tens of thousands of forces, both Kurdish and Arab, under the Syrian Democratic Forces. And that 1/3 of Syria is the resource-rich, it's the economic powerhouse of Syria. So where the hydrocarbons are, which obviously is very much in the public debate here in Washington these days, as well as the agricultural powerhouse. But we argued that it wasn't just about this 1/3 of Syrian territory that the U.S. military and our military presence owned, both to fight ISIS and also as leverage for affecting the overall political process for the broader Syrian conflict.
So that fungus that grew off of Irving Kristol's grave is Dana Stroul, a co-chair of the Syrian Study Group at CSIS. And what she's essentially saying is the U.S. owns northeast Syria and is using it as leverage to weaken and destroy Damascus. And what is the outcome of that leverage, Aaron, for the population of Syria right now?
Well, it means that, for example, after a devastating earthquake, Syria doesn't have the resources, including fuel, that it needs to respond to it. And Syria is also deprived not only of its own oil, but also its own wheat, because as she bragged about, the U.S. owns the region that is Syria's agricultural powerhouse, because the U.S. is occupying it. So it means more starvation, more suffering for a country that's gone through a decade-long dirty war. And now Dana Stroul, she was speaking there in 2019 when she was at that think tank or that study group. Now she's running Syria policy for Biden's Pentagon. She's a senior official at the Pentagon now. Yeah.
Yeah. So these are the people animating Biden right now.
Yeah.
And U.S. soldiers are suffering traumatic brain injuries in Syria. But if you remember before, there was the attack by Iran with ballistic missiles on the Al-Assad U.S. airbase inside Iraq as retaliation for the assassination of the second most powerful official in Iran, Major General Qasem Soleimani, the targeted assassination by Donald Trump with Benjamin Netanyahu right behind him. And what are these troops really doing there? I mean, they're sitting ducks.
Yep.
And the reason they're there is to establish a tripwire for war with Iran. If the U.S. wants to create a pretext for direct military conflict with Iran, you got them there. They're going to be hit in any retaliatory strike. And you have figures in the U.S. deep state, national security state, whether it's Dana Stroul or John Bolton, who would probably be more interested in war with Iran than they would be with Russia. There are figures that are just focused on a regional war with Iran.
Yeah. And meanwhile, of course, Israel continuously bombs Syria, including the capital Damascus, including the airports of Damascus and Aleppo. Aleppo is being hard hit by the earthquake, and it barely gets reported in the U.S. media. It's just it's like the air we breathe, that Israel has the right to bomb Syria whenever it wants. It's bombed Syria hundreds of times over the last several years, and no one cares.
And I guarantee you that they are using NSA. They are working with the NSA to do targeting. That they are working with the Pentagon to do targeting. I guarantee you.
It's been reported. It's been reported in the Wall Street Journal that the U.S. approves. This is the headline here. I'll show it. This is the headline in the Wall Street Journal from last year. Here it is. That the U.S. basically is it's secretly. Here it is. Why is this giving me trouble? Here, 1 second. U.S. secretly reviews Israel's plans for strikes against Iranian targets in Syria. So basically, this is a joint U.S.-Israeli operation, these Israeli strikes inside Syria.
Yeah. And this is what happened also when Israel was bombarding southern Lebanon in 2006. The NSA and U.S. government helped them do that targeting. Israel is, in the words of former Secretary of State Alexander Haig, America's unsinkable aircraft carrier in the Middle East. And that's what the U.S. has planned for Ukraine as well. It is a proxy war, a dirty war, and the U.S. and Israel are manufacturing a humanitarian catastrophe in Syria. And now we're seeing U.S. service members start to pay the price. And when you hear a week after they come under attack that they've suffered traumatic brain injuries, just as they did at the Al-Assad base in Iraq, that means that the Pentagon has been trying to keep that news away from the American public because they don't want domestic repercussions. And the news of hundreds of traumatic brain injuries of service members in Iraq was kept from the public for weeks and weeks and weeks. They were transferred to Ramstein Air Base in Germany, given medical care, and it's always swept under the rug. We will see deaths. We saw the death of a quote unquote contractor in Syria, an American contractor, otherwise known as a mercenary. It's only a matter of time before U.S. service members are killed, and that could lead to another military escalation. What it should lead to is that we start taking seriously resolutions like Matt Gaetz introduced in Congress with the support of the Progressive Caucus to end the U.S. presence, the U.S. illegal occupation in Syria, which violates Syrian sovereignty and is killing silently thousands and thousands of Syrians. And we'll keep covering this.
Absolutely.
U.S. media won't.
Yeah.
Anyway, thanks a lot, Aaron. Again, congratulations on the richly deserved award and getting the respect you deserve. And thanks for everyone for joining us. Support us as you see below. That's how you can do it, or just support us through your presence. And if you're in LA or New York, You can check us out on Pacifica. We do like a hour-long highlights show every Tuesday at 5 p.m. LA KPFK 90.7 FM and WBAI New York 99.5 FM on Sunday at 6 p.m. So listen to us there. And you can also hear all of these interviews and others that we conduct with other platforms that just look up Max Blumenthal on Anchor FM or Spotify, and my podcast has it all. Aaron, anything else you got going on or you want to say before we check out?
Like this stream if you can, because that helps us out, apparently, helps more people see it. And thanks to everyone for joining us. See you next time.
Peace.
Peace.